Warning. Within this fixing video, heavy subjects will be addressed such as mental illness disorders, school shootings, toxic relationships, and other assorted issues. If these are things you don't feel comfortable hearing about, I understand if you don't wish to continue watching this video. Welcome back for part 2 of my Fixing Nubia series. For those who may be watching this out of order, I am taking the comic Nubia Real One and rewriting the events within the story. The characters are mostly the same, but I have added new ones. The reason I'm doing this is mainly because the comic received heavy criticism, and like all my fixing videos, I take those criticisms and attempt to rewrite a more coherent story with them. Am I successful? Most of the comments I receive are positive, but I do receive criticism that is constructive, and I do appreciate it. With that said, let me recap the rewrites so far. The first video was about introducing characters current and new and setting up the plot. I specifically focused on Nubia and her friends Keisha and Jason and their families. With part 2, I will be shifting the focus on mainly Nubia and her relationship with her family, specifically Amira. I'll also be focusing on the new side characters Blue, Mateo, and Lewis, who will play vital roles in part 3. So it's important that I dive into their characters in this video before the final video. In the last video, I had to give warnings beforehand because I did discuss sensitive topics, such as toxic relationships and the kidnapping of children and bullying. All of that was very lightly talked about, but with this video, the topics are going to get darker as I lightly brush upon police violence, more bullying, harassment, and the big one, unaliving oneself. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the actual word or not, so I'm going to play it safe. I get that these are some very heavy topics, and you're probably wondering why am I putting them in this comic considering the original comic was for a young adult audience. And to that I say, in Ella McKinney's comic, children get shot, specifically 3, and one of them does die. In my rewrite, spoiler, only one child gets hurt and dies, and it was their choice. I know I'm a broken record for saying this, but there is a very important specific reason why I'm putting this in. This intro is a hell of a lot shorter than the one in the first video. I do apologize for that long intro. 10 minutes. It was 10 minutes long. But there were things that needed to be talked about and addressed beforehand, but I shouldn't have to do that with this video or the next. Like I previously said, I'm not a professional, so take what I say regarding the sensitive subject matter with a grain of salt, especially since everyone's experiences are different. With that said, please keep in mind that what I write is fictional. I do not mean to insinuate anything, but because I am addressing very sensitive topics that unfortunately keeps getting more relevant, I do feel the need to cover my ass. With all that being said, please enjoy part 2 of Fixing Nubia Real One. Nubia wakes before anyone else does and decides to go home. She leaves a note for Keisha. Not long, a car pulls up and it's Bo. He gives her a ride. Is it scary doing night patrol? It can be. You never know what's lurking in the dark. But surprisingly, it can be peaceful too. You sound just like my mom. How's that? She tells me that I should stand my ground without throwing a punch. Talk about contradiction. We cops do it every day. We have to enforce the law as best as we can while trying our best to keep it from getting physical. If we mess up, the consequences can be fatal for everyone involved. That's just it. How do you know when you're gonna have to get physical? And is there any way to prevent it? What's going on, Nubia? Someone messing with you? I always thought it was better to avoid confrontation. That's what everyone said. Use your words, not your fists. It did seem to work when I was a kid, but now that I'm older, I think it makes things worse. It's hard growing up. The rules change. But don't worry too much about knowing if or when to swing. The real concern is after, when you have to carry it with you. Bo drops Nubia off at her house and gives her one more piece of advice. Treasure the simple days. They'll help you through the hard ones. When creating Bo's character, I knew I wanted him and Nubia to have a conversation, just the two of them. The reason for it is because we've all been there thinking our parents are being unfair, but when we get an outsider's perspective of it, specifically an adult's, we realize they do what they do out of love. Most of them anyway. And that's what this is. Also, this was to address the whole cop issue in the comic. Cops make mistakes. They're only human, but without a doubt, they need to be held accountable for those mistakes. The system is not perfect. Changes need to happen, but at the same time, it can't be ignored that things would be way worse without police officers. It's just all one big muddy mess. That's all I'll say about it. I don't know if this will be the only conversation that Nubia and Bo are going to have. I kind of want to do another one, but I'll only do it if it feels right. I don't want to ever force something in the story unless there's a reason for it. Nubia quietly enters the house, not wanting to disturb the residents, but of course Amira is already up. She offers Nubia a cup of coffee. It's moments like this that Nubia appreciates how grown up Amira treats her. But when she was a kid with a scraped knee, the most she would get from Amira was a glance, telling her to walk it off. Luckily, Danielle was always there to balance things out. How did the studying go? Oh, fine, yeah. So it's safe to assume you'll get a perfect score on your next test? Sure. Amira instructs Nubia to help her move bags of fertilizer, but Nubia wants to take a shower. Amira insists she sweat first. Not to mention the shower might wake Danielle up. The two get to work, barefooted as always in the garden. It's quiet moments like this that Nubia notices the similar traits she took from her mother. However, the silence gets to be too much. Nubia asks who taught her to garden. Amira pauses for a moment. I had a teacher that taught me. I had many teachers. But the reason for this flourishing garden is a discipline. Talent can only carry so far. But with discipline, there is nothing you can't do well. But isn't trying to be good at everything unrealistic? Isn't it okay to just be okay? If you're bad at something, strive to be good at it. If you're good at something, be great at it. I think it's time to give some insight into Amira. Because Amira failed to return Nubia to Themyscira before her first year, she's trying to make up for it by raising Nubia the way she believes Hippolyta would have. Not to mention, because Hippolyta is her queen, it's safe to assume that Amira would hold her in high regards. As a result, this could lead her to believe that everything she does will never match her idolized version of her queen. I think to an extent this is true. There's no telling what Nubia's life would have been like had she grown up in Themyscira with her mother and sister. But due to this way of thinking, Amira has unintentionally raised the bar beyond realistic expectations for a child, and that's why the relationship is on shaky ground. The reason for this conversation was specifically for Nubia to pop the question, is she enough? That was something that I'm Not Starfire struggled with as well. I do believe Amira knew what Nubia was asking here, but like with a lot of parents, telling your child the honest truth exposes a certain amount of vulnerability that some people, parent or not, are not comfortable with. However, the way Amira answered Nubia, it unfortunately instilled in Nubia the thought that, to Amira, she's not enough. At school, all anyone can talk about is the party and Nubia. She's been receiving the star treatment from her classmates all day. Jason and Keisha are confused by this, and so is Nubia. Finally, they get the answer from their classmate Wayne. If not for you standing up to Mateo, the party would most likely have ended. You saved the night. I just didn't want Mateo or Blue to ruin everyone's fun. Wait, Blue got involved? Man, she's getting worse. Tell me about it. One slip up and you're on her blacklist. No questions asked. Hard to believe everyone looked up to her just a year ago. The bell rings and they all head to their next class. Trisha stops by Nubia's home to drop off a bag, which has Danielle caught off guard. Trisha explains that she had planned to donate the dresses she couldn't wear anymore, but remembered how beautiful Nubia looked in the dress she wore last night and thought Nubia would like to have them. Why was she wearing your dress last night? She didn't have anything to wear for the party, didn't she tell you? She said she was studying for a test. I am so sorry. If I knew, I would have never. It's okay. Nubia is the one that needs to do the explaining, and so does Keisha. Trisha awkwardly asks if she still wants the dresses, and Danielle awkwardly accepts them, not wanting the trip to be for nothing. The cat's out of the bag. This quick little scene was not only to give some insight into Blue before diving into her backstory, but I also want to show how people used to view her as to how they do now. You can even go as far as to say Blue is somewhat of the embodiment of cancel culture. Now onto the lie. In the comic, there are incidents where Nubia and her parents get into disagreements, but it didn't feel that there was any weight to any of them, which made me question what was the point. Almost every argument Nubia gets into with her parents, she's immediately comforted, reaffirmed, and essentially rewarded afterwards. There's no other way to put it. With my rewrite, I want there to be stakes. I want the arguments that she gets in with her parents to mirror our own experiences with our parents. That's the reason for this scene, to establish that there is going to be an argument at some point and hopefully create anticipation for it. This next part is where we dive into Blue's backstory and learn her motives, meaning there will be mention of bullying, prejudice, and unaliving oneself. So this is your warning. If any of these subjects are triggering for you, I completely understand if you need to just click off. School's over and Nubia finds herself alone. Keisha has therapy today and Jason has practice as usual. Nubia ponders on what she could do with this free time, however, aggressive voices catches her attention. She knows she's not supposed to, but she eavesdrops anyway. Blue is cornered by two of Mateo's crew. They insist on her leaving school with them, but Blue refuses. However, they're not taking no for an answer. Seeing that neither side is relenting, Nubia decides to step in. She casually addresses Blue as if they were friends, claiming that their teacher wants to see her. Blue doesn't respond, and the other two are not eager to let her go. I'll just go get the teacher. The two finally relent but carefully watches the two of them leave. They walk down the hallway and make a turn. However, Nubia can hear them following. She takes Blue further down the hall until they find an empty classroom. They hide there until they leave. You shouldn't have done that. I could have handled it. There was two of them and one of you. What part of that could you have handled? They're getting bolder. School used to be safe. The park used to be safe. Are you still sore about that? At least it was me and not Mateo. What's the difference? What the hell do you know? Explain it to me then. What I do is protect kids from bullies like Mateo and his crew. And when you want something, you bully people into giving it to you. You gotta be kidding me. Just let the court go. It's not about the court. Other kids you claim you're protecting, are scared of you. They're scared if they mess up just one time, they'll be put on your blacklist. Good. That'll keep them from doing something wrong in the first place. How did you get like this? For a moment, Blue hesitated to answer, but eventually told Nubia her origin story. It started when she was in middle school. Back then, it was just her, Dee, and Jack. The three of them have known each other since elementary school, and Jack was their fearless leader and Blue's first crush. With high school just around the corner and their bodies starting to show signs of change, it was open season for teasing. No one was exempt from this, but it seemed Jack would get it the worst than anyone else. Blue at the time thought it was harmless fun, and when the kids had their fill, they'd move on to the next. However, it never seemed to stop for Jack. It would only be after it happened that her parents would sit her down and explain it to her. Growing up with Jack, Blue never realized that Jack's family was unique compared to others. His parents were ethnically different from each other, and it showed in Jack. For reasons still unknown to Blue to this day, mixed-race relationships of that caliber are scrutinized, and children are not exempt from it. People's bias of this harmless relationship rubbed off on their children. Most of them didn't even know how heavily soaked in hate the names they called Jack were. He would always put up a brave face until he just couldn't anymore. Jack was always considerate of other people's feelings, that's why he couldn't bring himself to do it in his own home. He didn't want either one of his parents to be the one to find him. The police investigated, but the note made it clear it was intentional. All this happened a week before Blue's birthday, and on that day, Jack's mother gave her the present he had originally got her. They all made a promise to get piercings together someday. Blue wears it as a remembrance of her friend and a reminder not to look the other way. Let them be scared. After all, what's stronger than hate? Isn't that how it's born? Are you scared of me? What's there to be scared of? If that's the case, why did you leave? I should have stood my ground. If I did, we could have played a game. And I would have whooped your ass. With nothing left to talk about, they check to see if the coast is clear, and it is. The two go their separate ways, but not before they take one last glance at each other. I feel that I need to clarify something. When Blue says, what's stronger than hate, she's referring to people's hate towards her. If they're busy hating her, then they're more likely to bond over that. Kinda like in Code Geass, where Lelouch becomes the villain to get everyone to unite against him. When it comes to Blue's backstory, I know it was questionable, but the importance of it was how Blue perceived the cause of the tragic incident and how she moved on from it, which is the key word. I can't say any more than that. There's another backstory that needs to be revealed before I can talk in depth about the context of these backstories. But what I will ask, are you noticing any changes within Nubia? In the comic, Nubia's transformation was somewhat aggressive. In the beginning, she was passive with the store clerk and the officer that arrested her, but after that, she got violent, so to speak. She punched Wayland, threw an officer, and threw a desk inches away from her classmate. Unfortunately, she did throw an ATM in the beginning of the comic. It just wasn't a good look for her. In the rewrite, it was always about Nubia learning to stand up for herself, standing her ground in a non-violent way, until she can't. And I do hope that I will have displayed that when this rewrite is finished. After standing her ground, Nubia feels satisfied with herself, but failed to realize how late it got. Only when she enters the house is she reminded of the time. Danielle does her best to mediate, but it's clear that Amira will lead the conversation. Nubia takes a scolding, but when it leads to the bag of dresses, it's then that she realizes the severity of the situation. She's been caught. What the hell made you think you could lie to us? Why didn't you tell us about the party? What would be the point? Watch it. You hardly ever let me do anything unless you can breathe down my neck as I do it. And you always agree with her no matter what it is, no matter how harmless it is, you always agree with her. Nubia, I get that you're frustrated, but that doesn't mean you can lie to us. That's not happening again. I hope it was worth you losing all your privileges until you graduate. Are you serious? That seems a bit extreme, Amira. Things will get more extreme if you have to repeat the grade. Having a little fun does not automatically mean I'm going to fail in school or in life. No, it just means that you're going to do poorly in it. Whatever mistakes you made are not mine to fix. Not realizing the nerve Nubia just touched, Amira lunges at her, pinning Nubia against the wall. Nubia's instincts kick in as she pushes Amira away and in a moment of panic runs. Not hearing Danielle call out to her, Nubia ran as fast and as long as her legs would carry her. Finally, she had to stop, and when she did, she lets it all out. After it all finally leaves her, she takes a look at her surroundings but can't recognize where she is. Just where did her legs take her? It's no secret that I don't like how Nubia's relationship with her parents, specifically Amira, was written in the comic. Like I previously said, I wanted this encounter to mirror our own experiences with our parents. Most of us have been there with our parents, caught in a lie and feeling like we're being ganged up on. It's a rite of passage to be chewed out by our parents. However, the importance of this argument is to say out loud the issues in their relationship, not just with Nubia and Amira, but also with Danielle as well. In the first video, I tried to hint at Nubia and Amira's fractured relationship. In the beginning of this video, I confirmed that yes, there is an issue that the characters have not addressed to each other until now when they have no choice but to, thanks to Trisha. Obviously, Nubia doesn't know Amira's backstory, so she doesn't realize the pain and fear her words caused Amira. I think some parents do struggle with this, wanting to do better than their parents and living their dreams through their children. For Amira, it's about redemption. This can have a negative effect on a child, and I need to make this clear. There is a difference between punishing your child and putting your hands on a child. Amira crossed that line. There is no mistaking that. I did question if I should put this in, but it's imperative to the resolution to their family dynamic. Danielle refuses to let Amira go after Nubia. She insists that they both need space. Danielle very seldom asserts herself, but she's putting her foot down. You're not thinking rationally, because if you were, you would have never laid a hand on Nubia. Danielle, I don't have time for this. I have to go after her. No, the least I can do for Nubia is keep you from her. What are you talking about? She's my daughter. Exactly. I've let you take the lead in raising Nubia because it never felt like she was ours, but always yours. And I've been patiently waiting for you to move on from whatever haunts you so we can be a family. But Nubia's almost 18, and if we both keep this up, we're going to push her away. It's complicated. I told you this when we met, and you said you accepted it. And that was my mistake. I don't know what you come from, but clearly you are incapable of moving past that. You holding on to that chest for all these years is evidence of that. If it wasn't for Nubia, I don't know if I would have put up with it for as long as I have. What do you want me to say? Nubia is special and I have a duty to raise her to her fullest potential. You don't think I know that? I'm not blind to the miraculous things that befalls that child. We live in a world of extraordinary superhumans, and it's clear Nubia is one of them. So you know why it's important that I keep a close eye on her. I know that she's going to move mountains, and the first one she moves is you. I understand that with young adult graphic novels, it's important that the readers are able to see themselves within the young protagonist. That's kind of the whole point of the young adult genre. But I don't think it's a bad thing to put the spotlight on the parents or adults in the stories and show their perspective every now and then. I will commend Ella McKinney for that. She did give a moment just to the adults. I made it clear that the root of Amira's problem involving her relationship with Nubia was her not being able to let go of her past, which you can say the chest is an embodiment of. The significance of the chest, besides the obvious, is that it's Amira's link to Themyscira, but also a chain that keeps her from living the life she has with Danielle and Nubia. When it comes to Danielle, I think she's overlooked, and this scene was to give her character agency that I don't think she had in the comic. Danielle does have some strong moments in the comic, but again, it goes back to how it was written that prevents it from falling through as strongly as it could have. That's just my opinion. A car stops beside the bewildered Nubia. It's Oscar. Her cheeks are still puffy, and Oscar doesn't hesitate to invite her in. He is, however, hesitant to ask what happened. With a weak voice, she tells him that she got in a fight with her mom. It's clear she doesn't want to go back, so Oscar decides to take her somewhere else. They arrive at a convenience store. Sugary drinks always make things better. I don't have any money. Don't worry, I got you. Nubia doesn't feel like going in the store, so she opts to get a drink from the vending machine. However, Louis arrives and is somewhat caught off guard finding Nubia in their neighborhood. He immediately orders Oscar to go in the store and get him some smokes. Despite Oscar being underage, the cashier is a member of Mateo's crew. Oscar rejects the order and Louis glares at him, but it's Nubia that eases the tension. She tells Oscar that it's okay and he hesitantly goes in the store. You're not going to be able to push him around forever. Just until he goes to college. Now it's Nubia that's caught off guard. All this time she thought Louis was trying to indoctrinate Oscar into the crew, but could it possibly be the other way around? Are you seriously claiming to be protecting him? You're making it harder. How do you figure that? He used to do what I said when I said it, and that's how I kept him away from Mateo. But because he wants to hang out with you and your friends, Mateo gets closer. That doesn't make sense. You're with Mateo. Because it was either me or Oscar. I do what Mateo says, and he leaves Oscar alone. But that doesn't mean others won't try to recruit him. When it comes to Louis's character, originally he was just going to be that typical cousin that bullies their other cousins. When I was rewriting the party, that was when it clicked for me that Louis was an important character, specifically to Oscar. Knowing this now, it aggravates me that I didn't draw him in the first video. Louis is an insightful character that saw the writing on the wall when Mateo's crew was becoming more established. His motive similarly aligns with Blue and Mateo, which I will talk about after this next scene. This may be weird to say, but I think Louis is my favorite original character. As for Oscar, he's that friend that you can lean on, that won't judge you and that will always be there for you. That's how I saw him in the comic, which made him into a somewhat solid character. However, due to how he was drawn and the situations he was put in and how he got out of them, it took away his character's agency. Ironically, it was Nubia that was doing this to him. He was given a moment to shine when he took a bullet for Nubia, but she took it right back, not only by assaulting the officers that shot him, but by also carrying him away like a woman. Also, can anyone explain this to me? Nubia said he jumped in front of the bullet, but he's beside her, not in front. Not to mention, wouldn't he have fallen on her upon impact? It's confusing. I feel the need to mention that in this next part, while there isn't anything explicitly mentioned, I do use the word harass. It's done away so the viewer can interpret it for themselves. The conversation is interrupted as several more cars roll in. Louis tells Nubia to get back in the car and he'll get Oscar. Nubia was ready to do as she was told, but after everything else that's happened today, what's left to be afraid of? Fancy seeing you in our neighborhood. What are you doing here? I thought I'd go for a run. You should be drinking water or a sports drink, not a soda. One of his guys makes a crude remark to Nubia about breaking a sweat and Mateo glares at him. He quickly shuts up and goes in the store. It's now just Nubia and Mateo. They must really respect you. It's more about fear. Again with the fear. Why does that seem to be the only answer to things? Because that's what caused it. I know what you and everyone else thinks of me, and that's fine. Because if you're afraid of me, you won't dare do anything to cross me. You want our fear to cancel out yours? Is that it? What are you afraid of? Growing up, Mateo was always told to keep his head down around others outside their community. That was the best way to be left alone, but sometimes it wasn't enough. There never seemed to be a proper excuse for the harassment, as if there ever is. Despite it happening more frequently, there never seemed to be much effort made on the cops' part to catch the assailants. His mother did her best to shield Mateo from the bigotry and teach him that there was more good than bad. For a time, Mateo believed his mother, but that changed when she became the harasser's next target. His mother was hospitalized and no one was ever arrested. The harassing stopped because we stopped putting up with it. What does your mother think of all this? I think that she knows that she doesn't have to be afraid anymore. You sure about that? What about the people that will eventually get tired of being scared of you? I like you. Any chance you want to join? Nubia can't tell if he's joking or not. It's silent between the two as Oscar and Louis comes out. Someone approaches Mateo, whispering something to him. Mateo quickly starts speaking in Spanish. All Nubia understood was "Vámonos." Oscar grabs Nubia and takes her to his car. Louis catches a ride with the others since Oscar is driving his car. Oscar waits for them to leave before he starts the car, but Nubia isn't ready to leave just yet. What's going on? What happened? A member just got hit by a car. Oh God. Is there something else? What is it? Right before he got hit, he sent a pic of two of Blue's crew. The two speculate what could have happened, but it's concerning what Mateo thinks might have happened. Regardless of what happened, one thing is clear. This will only aggravate the tension between the two crews. There's nothing they can do, and it's time for them to go home. That's the last thing Nubia wants to hear, but what other choice does she have? Now we get to the core of the problem. This includes both Mateo and Blue. In the comic, while Waylon was a physical manifestation of an antagonist for Nubia, but the narration that was the driving force for the plot, and that is the true antagonist in my opinion, was racism. I've talked about this in the first video. Ella McKinney's comic did not shy away from addressing this, but the constant mention of it became repetitive, which can leave the readers feeling exhausted. For many reviewers of the comic, this was one of the main issues they had with the comic. It's definitely an important subject that should be addressed to an extent, but the amount that it was talked about in the comic was excessive. In my rewrites, I always try to respect the original visions, particularly with this rewrite given the sensitive subject matter. The way I went about this was by having racism be the silent narrator instead of the vocal one that it was in the comic. Everything that is happening and will happen in this rewrite is a chain reaction to how these two side characters responded to the prejudice they experienced. But the thing is, Blue and Mateo didn't directly experience racism the way Nubia did in the comic. Instead, they experienced the side effects of it, and as a result, it somewhat inspired them to become leaders in an attempt to protect those around them and prevent heinous acts like those from happening again. That's the positive that can come from these negative encounters with racism. Terrible things will happen, and it is important to properly grieve when it does, but it's just as important to heal from it so you don't carry that with you. It is possible Ella McKinney was trying to go down this route, and maybe that's why Nubia broke down when Amira was scolding her for sneaking out, but it just didn't carry through, and instead it just looked like she was trying to get out of trouble. Now let's talk about the negative responses due to these racist encounters, because they shouldn't be ignored. Blue and Mateo becoming leaders was a positive response to these negative events in their lives, but because they didn't properly heal or move on, the trauma of those events is corrupting their originally innocent and somewhat heroic motive. The same can be said about Lewis. He's trying to protect his cousin, but instead he's isolating him, which may do more harm than good when he goes away to college, making him more susceptible to falling into the wrong crowd. The real tragedy is that the characters are aware that they are perpetuating a cycle that originally traumatized them. Back home, Nubia hesitates to get out of the car. Showing up with a boy would surely only make the situation worse. She thanks Oscar for being there for her and kisses him on the cheek. If her mom's going to murder her, she might as well complete her bucket list. She looks back at Oscar one final time before going inside. She finds Danielle waiting for her, but Amira is nowhere in sight. Oh, thank God, I was about to call the cops. Sorry, I just needed some space. Where's Amira staying at a hotel tonight? We thought that would be best, and she wanted me to tell you that she is sorry. I shouldn't have said what I did. No, you shouldn't have, but she crossed the line. And Nubia, I'm sorry too. For what? For not standing up for you more. Danielle heats up leftovers for Nubia, who didn't realize how hungry she was getting. After scarfing down the food, the weight of the day's events comes crashing down. She doesn't even have the strength to take a bath. Emotionally drained, she falls on her bed, but sleep eludes her. The fear of what morning might bring keeps her up. With only a few hours of sleep, Nubia prepares for the day with only Danielle to see her off. What can be said about this? Sometimes what's best for the child and for the family is giving each other the necessary space to process the words that was said, especially if the argument got physical. Also, it's important that those involved take accountability for the part they played. I'm noticing that's a reoccurring issue in different medias, especially in Disney movies, such as Strange World and Raya and the Last Dragon. Those are some unfortunately good examples of characters not taking accountability. Go figure. Nubia keeps the events of yesterday from her friends, but they're already aware of one of them. It's all the school can talk about. Juan, a senior and a member of Mateo's crew, was hit by a car last night. Luckily, the car was turning at the time, so it wasn't as bad as it could have been. He is expected to make a full recovery, but his crew is blaming Blue's crew. Apparently, there was some type of altercation beforehand between Juan and two of Blue's crew, which led them to chasing Juan, and that's what caused the hit and run. Gossiping won't change anything, and Nubia opts to change the subject. In class, the teachers take a moment to address the hit and run and talk about traffic safety. Nubia blocks it all out as an uneasy feeling washes over her. She hopes that lunch will be a nice distraction, but it's not. The tension is mounting not just between the crews, but between the students that are starting to take sides. Blue's crew is being openly chastised, which is a first. A fight breaks out not between the crews, but between the students defending them. The teachers break it up. This is crazy. All it took was just one day? Maybe the teachers will do something about it. Are you kidding? They'd first have to admit this happened under their watch. Maybe after a week or two things will go back to normal. Or things could just escalate. It's easier to tear down a bridge than build one. Oh God, what if this is still happening after we graduate? That's when T starts high school. Everyone was on edge for the rest of the day. The only relief was when the final bell rang. Even the teachers looked relieved. Nubia spots Blue and approaches her. Some students give Nubia questionable glances for walking with Blue. You here to scold me too? Blue, what happened is between you and Mateo. I want no part of that, but I am here if you need someone to talk to. Blue pauses, not sure what to make of Nubia's offer, but she does seem comforted by it. When Nubia meets up with her friend, she's a bit hesitant to start walking home. She still has yet to tell them about yesterday. She knows that they'll do whatever they could to support her, but she just isn't ready to share. At home, she takes a breath before opening the door. Is she in the garden? Sometimes adults need space too. Nubia can see that she's holding back tears. As Danielle cooks, Nubia goes out into the garden. Despite her being anxious for when she'll see her mom again, Nubia wishes she was here now, and that things would go back to normal already. Everything is changing and it's scaring her. That night, Nubia, Keisha, and Jason spend half the night texting, comforting each other about school. Nubia hears someone outside her door and immediately pretends to be asleep. Their steps are too faint to be Danielle's, which means she's finally home. People can be very quick to take sides, especially nowadays. Cancel culture is a prime example of this. This is to show how everything is escalating and how so much has changed in such a short amount of time. In the beginning of the rewrite, no one wanted anything to do with either crews, and now everyone is taking sides. They're even bold enough to criticize Blue and her crew. In the beginning of this video, it was stated that everyone was scared to talk ill about Blue because they were afraid of being put on her blacklist. Oh, how things change. One of the things that I didn't like about Nubia's character in the comic was how she inserted herself in what was originally Keisha's business. I'm not saying her standing up for a friend was wrong. It annoyed me that instead of trying to do the responsible thing first and get an adult involved, Nubia opted to stay silent and become Keisha's private bodyguard, which was not the right or healthy answer, and it only seemed to escalate the situation with Wayland. It would have been different if they did try telling an adult first and Wayland wormed his way out of it, claiming it to be a misunderstanding. If that had happened, I'd be more sympathetic to Nubia's decision. Not only that, but Nubia having to rescue Keisha from Wayland somehow takes agency away from Keisha as well. I'll admit that in my rewrite, Nubia does somewhat get involved in other people's problems, such as with Oscar telling him to stand up against Lewis, the incident at the party, and with Blue in the hallway. The difference between the comic and this rewrite is Nubia speaks against the issue, but she doesn't insert herself in the conflict. The only time that happens in the rewrite is with Blue, but she only does it to get Blue out of a situation before it escalates. After that, she leaves Blue alone. She doesn't become a member, and she doesn't insert herself in the problem Blue is currently having. This is a coming-of-age story. My biggest goal with this rewrite was not only focusing on Nubia's character, but also how she responds to the changes around her, whether they are caused by her or not. That was another issue I had with the comic. When it came to Nubia's character, whenever something happens to Nubia, she either sulks about it or she violently responds to it. There is no in-between with her. What happens within Nubia's family is a direct cause of unspoken feelings that's been bottled up for some time, and there's no putting them back in. She has to live with it and the changes it's causing. Without a doubt, change is terrifying, especially when you're a kid on the cusp of adulthood. But when you know that you are part of the reason for that change, it's even more terrifying because there's no telling what direction that change will lead to. And that's the fear Nubia is experiencing, but that doesn't mean there's no light at the end of the tunnel. That will be all for part 2. I hope you enjoyed it to some extent. I know this one got pretty dark and heavy, but it was necessary to move the story along so we can get to the climax and the conclusion to that, which will be in part 3. I know that some characters took a back seat in this video, specifically Keisha and Jason, but don't worry, everyone will be given hopefully a satisfying conclusion in the story. Fair warning, I made it clear in the first video what the final conflict will ensue, and given everything that unfortunately has been happening with schools, I feel the need to warn you that the third video will have a school shooting just like in the comic. However, I'm unsure if I should add sound effects or even draw any type of weapon within the scenes. I'd really appreciate hearing your opinions about this. I will do my best to write this issue as respectfully as possible. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave comments and tell me what you think of the story so far, and like and subscribe!